Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time. Not to a battlefield or royal court, but to a place shrouded in mystery and echoing with ancient whispers. We're going to explore what it was really like to be an oracle at Delphi, a role that promised divine insight but came with a disturbing cost. Imagine, for a moment, that you are a young woman in ancient Greece, living a simple life in a quiet village, perhaps tending to your flock of sheep or weaving cloth. You might dream of a family, a home, a life much like any other. But fate, or perhaps the gods, have a different plan for you, one that will twist your destiny in ways you can barely comprehend. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where are you tuning in from tonight? And what time is it there? Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You live a simple life, a life connected to the earth, the cycles of the seasons, and the familiar faces of your village. Your days are filled with the rhythm of agricultural tasks, the scent of olive groves and wild herbs, the sound of goats bleating in the distance. You know your place in the world, a small but secure part of a larger community. You are, by all accounts, an ordinary woman, perhaps unremarkable in any particular way. You might be from a farming family, or perhaps you assist in a local temple, performing simple duties. You are not learned in the ways of philosophy or politics. Your knowledge is of the land, of practical skills, of the age-old traditions passed down through generations. Your hands are calloused from work, your face weathered by the sun, but your spirit is perhaps still gentle, unburdened by the complexities of the wider Greek world. Then the whispers begin. Not the everyday gossip of the village, but something far more potent, more unsettling. Tales of visitations, of dreams, of sudden inexplicable changes in young women. You hear stories of girls your age, or perhaps a little older, who begin to exhibit strange behaviors, sudden fits. Speaking in tongues, visions. These aren't considered madness, not here, not in this sacred land. These are signs. The god, Apollo, they say, is choosing. The criteria for becoming a Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi, were surprisingly mundane on the surface, yet deeply profound in their implications. You couldn't be too young, nor too old. You had to be a woman of good character, unblemished by scandal or moral transgression. And crucially, you had to be a native of Delphi or one of its nearby villages, deeply rooted in the local traditions and reverence for Apollo. But beyond these practical requirements lay the true, unsettling selection process, a divine manifestation. You wouldn't apply for the job would choose you. It was said that Apollo would send a sign, a sudden, overwhelming feeling, an inexplicable urge, or a profound dream. Sometimes it manifested as a trance, a sudden speaking of words that were not your own, yet held a strange, resonant power. Imagine the day it happens to you. Perhaps you are by the spring, drawing water, the sun warm on your skin, or maybe you are tending a small fire, preparing the evening meal. Suddenly, a profound chill seizes you. Despite the warmth of the day, your vision blurs. The familiar world around you seems to ripple and distort. A strange buzzing fills your ears, growing louder, drowning out all other sound. A sense of being lifted, of being pulled from your own body, overwhelms you. Words, not your own, begin to form on your tongue, ancient and resonant, speaking of things you could not possibly know. You might collapse, your body shaking, your mind reeling, as if struck by lightning. This isn't a gentle transition, it's an overwhelming invasion, a sacred possession. Scholars have long debated whether these states were induced by natural gases emanating from fissures in the earth, or if they were purely psychological phenomena, perhaps even a form of controlled hysteria. The truth, as with most ancient mysteries, remains elusive. The villagers, witnessing this, would not recoil in fear, but in awe. They would recognize the signs, the divine touch. You would be taken, gently but firmly, by the priests of Apollo, away from your family, away from your familiar life. There would be no resisting. This wasn't an invitation, it was a divine decree. Your life, as you knew it, would end in that moment. You would no longer be just you. You would be Pythia, the vessel of Apollo, a conduit between the mortal and the divine. The weight of this new identity, this terrifying calling, would settle upon you, heavy and suffocating. Your new home would be within the temple complex itself, a place of hushed reverence and rigid routine. You would be cared for, yes, provided with food and shelter, but your freedom, your autonomy, would be stripped away. Your old name, your old identity, would slowly begin to fade. You are now the Pythia, a living bridge to the gods. You would be surrounded by older priestesses, women who had perhaps served for decades, their faces serene but distant, their eyes holding a wisdom that seemed to stretch beyond mortal years. They would guide you, instruct you in the rituals, teach you the ancient hymns, and prepare you for the profound responsibility that now rested upon your shoulders. Life within the temple was a stark contrast to your former simple existence. Every day would be a preparation for the moments when Apollo would speak through you. You would spend hours in silent contemplation, in purification rituals, in ritual fasting. You would learn the sacred language, the intonations, the proper responses, not to understand them fully yourself, but to allow the god to flow through you unhindered. Your diet would be carefully controlled, simple and unadorned, meant to purify your body for its divine purpose. Your interactions with the outside world would cease entirely, save for the solemn, anxious faces of those who came seeking Apollo's wisdom. The weight of the responsibility would be immense. You are no longer responsible for just your own well-being, but for the fate of kings, the outcome of wars, the prosperity of entire cities. People would come from across the Greek world, from distant colonies and powerful city-states, to seek Apollo's guidance through you. Their lives, their futures, hinged on your words, or rather, the god's words spoken through your lips. The pressure would be suffocating, the expectation of infallible wisdom a constant burden. You might struggle with the enormity of it, the constant anxiety of whether you were truly worthy, truly capable of such a sacred trust. The isolation would be profound. You are revered. Yes, almost worshipped. But you are also utterly alone. Your former family and friends would be distant memories. Your only companions are the other priestesses, their lives similarly consumed by service, and the high priests, who serve as your interpreters and guardians. There are no casual conversations, no shared laughter, no intimate moments. Your life is now one of sacred duty, a solitary existence dedicated to being a vessel. You would spend your days in the sacred precincts of Delphi, a sight that would inspire awe in anyone who beheld it. Nestled high on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, surrounded by breathtaking valleys and the deep, silent chasm of the Pleistos Gorge, it's a place of raw, untamed natural beauty. The air is clear and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and wild thyme. Eagles circle high above, their cries echoing in the vast emptiness. This dramatic landscape was believed to be the omphalos, the navel of the world, the very center of the earth, marked by a sacred stone. You would walk these hallowed grounds, aware of the immense spiritual power that seemed to emanate from the very rocks. But even this natural beauty is intertwined with the temple's disturbing purpose. The stories say that at Delphi there was a chasm, a fissure in the earth, from which intoxicating vapors emanated. These vapors, sweet and dizzying, were believed to be the breath of the god Apollo himself, the very essence that would induce the Pythia's trance. You might pass by these suspected fissures, feeling the strange currents of air, perhaps already beginning to feel a faint dizziness, a subtle disorientation, a prelude to the profound altered state that awaits you. A lesser-known historical tidbit is that Early archaeologists initially dismissed the idea of intoxicating gases, only for later geological surveys to find evidence of gas-emitting fault lines beneath the temple site. Though the exact composition and effect of these gases remain a fascinating subject of debate, the preparation for an oracular session was meticulous and deeply ritualistic. On the appointed day, traditionally the 7th day of the Delphian month, Apollo's sacred number one, you would undergo a series of purifications. First, a ritual bath in the Castalian spring, its icy waters believed to cleanse both body and spirit. The shock of the cold water would be jarring, yet invigorating, preparing you for the profound experience ahead. Then, you would chew laurel leaves, sacred to Apollo, their bitter taste filling your mouth, believed to enhance your connection to the divine. You might also drink from the sacred Cassiotis spring, another purification rite, its cool waters meant to soothe and prepare your internal self. Finally, dressed in simple, flowing white robes, you would be led by the priest to the temple. The air inside the temple would be thick with the scent of burning incense, meant to purify the space and calm the senses of the supplicants. The murmur of prayers and the low chanting of hymns would fill the air, creating an atmosphere of intense reverence and anticipation. You would feel the weight of countless eyes upon you, the hopeful, desperate gazes of those who had traveled for weeks, even months, to seek Apollo's wisdom. Their fate, they believed, rested entirely on the words that would soon issue from your lips. The most disturbing part of the preparation, perhaps, was the ritual with the goat. A goat chosen for its purity would be sprinkled with cold water. If it shivered, it was a sign that the omens were favorable, that Apollo was willing to speak. If it did not shiver, the session would be postponed, a profound disappointment for the waiting supplicants. Imagine the pressure, the anxiety, as you watch the goat, knowing that its simple reaction determined whether the god would speak through you that day. It's a strangely mundane yet deeply symbolic act, bridging the gap between the earthly and the divine. Then, you would be led to the Adyton, the most sacred inner sanctum of the temple, a chamber forbidden to all but the Pythia and the high priests. It was here, perched on a three-legged stool, the tripod, that you would commune with Apollo. The air in this chamber was different, heavier, perhaps faintly sweet or dizzying. This was the place where the earth itself was believed to breathe the god's essence. You would take your seat on the tripod, feeling the cold, hard bronze against your skin, knowing that this simple seat was the conduit to untold power. Seated on the tripod in the Adyton, the most sacred inner sanctum of the temple of Apollo at Delphi, you feel the cold bronze press against your body. The air in this small subterranean chamber is thick, heavy with the scent of burning incense and something else, something subtly sweet, yet dizzying that seems to hum in your ears. This is the pneuma, the breath of Apollo, believed to emanate from a fissure deep within the earth beneath the temple. You breathe deeply, as you've been instructed, and the intoxicating vapor fills your lungs, beginning its profound work on your senses. The room itself is small, perhaps carved directly from the rock. The only light comes from flickering oil lamps, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. You are alone here with the high priests of Apollo, usually 2 or 3 men, who stand solemnly, their faces grave with reverence and anticipation. They are the guardians of this sacred space, and more importantly, the interpreters of the cryptic words that will soon issue from your lips. Their presence is a strange comfort and a profound pressure all at once. As the pneuma takes hold, the world around you begins to shift. The flickering lamps seem to swim, their light distorting into halos. The hushed whispers of the priests become distant echoes, as if heard from underwater. A profound stillness settles over you, even as an inner tremor begins to build. Your body feels lighter, almost ethereal, yet simultaneously heavy, rooted to the spot by some unseen force. A strange warmth spreads through your limbs, followed by a tingling sensation, as if countless tiny needles are pricking your skin. This is the onset of the trance, The moment when the mortal world recedes and the divine connection begins, you try to hold onto your thoughts, onto your own identity, but it's like trying to grasp smoke. Your personal memories, your individual desires, your very sense of self all begin to unravel, replaced by a vast, buzzing emptiness. Images, fragmented and vivid, flash before your inner eye flashes of distant lands, faces you've never seen, symbols that hold no immediate meaning, sounds, disembodied and ethereal, echo in your ears the clang of unseen battles, the murmur of a distant sea, the rustling of ancient leaves. It's an overwhelming sensory overload, yet paradoxically, a profound sense of detachment. The physical effects are unsettling. Your breath becomes shallow and rapid, your chest heaving with uncontrolled gasps. Your eyes might roll back in your head, or fixate on some unseen point. Your limbs might twitch involuntarily, your body contorting into unnatural positions as the divine energy courses through you. It's not a comfortable state. It's a profound physical ordeal. The priests watch you carefully, their faces impassive, yet their eyes are keenly observing every tremor, every sigh. They are trained to recognize the signs, to know when Apollo is truly present within you. It's a fascinating historical detail that ancient accounts describe the Pythia's trance as violent and disturbing, quite unlike the serene image often portrayed in later art. Some accounts even suggest that some Pythias died during these intense sessions. Though this is debated, then the words begin. They are not your words, not your voice. They emerge from deep within your chest, guttural and strained. Sometimes a whisper, sometimes a shout, but always in a language that is both familiar and utterly alien. It might be in ancient Greek, but twisted, fragmented, filled with obscure metaphors and archaic phrasing. The words tumble out, disconnected, yet imbued with profound meaning. Speaking of futures and pasts, of choices and consequences, you are merely the conduit, the vessel through which the god's wisdom flows. You have no conscious control over what is said, no understanding of its deeper implications. The priests, seated around you, diligently transcribe every sound, every syllable. Their role is crucial. They are the interpreters, the ones who must take these cryptic utterances and translate them into coherent, understandable advice for the supplicant. This is where much of the oracle's famous ambiguity originated. Apollo's prophecies were rarely straightforward yes or no answers. They were riddles, poems, allegories, open to multiple interpretations. Scholars still debate how much influence the priest had over the final interpretation, and whether they sometimes subtly shaped the prophecies to align with their own political or social agendas. This unanswerable question forms a fascinating academic debate. Imagine a general fresh from a recent victory or facing a daunting enemy, standing before the Adyton, awaiting your words, or a city-state poised on the brink of war or famine, desperate for divine guidance. They would ask their questions, often complex and fraught with consequence, and you, in your trance, would respond. You might tell them to build a wooden wall, a cryptic instruction that could mean anything from actual timber defenses to a fleet of ships. The fate of their entire civilization might hinge on how they chose to interpret your divinely inspired, yet inherently ambiguous words. The tension in the chamber would be palpable, the supplicants holding their breath, straining to hear every sound. The Pythia's trance could last for minutes, sometimes even hours. An agonizing ordeal for your body? The intense muscular contractions, the rapid breathing, the sheer mental strain of being a vessel, it all takes a profound toll. When the words finally cease, a deep, shuddering gasp would escape your lips. The ethereal emptiness within you would slowly begin to recede, replaced by a profound sense of exhaustion. Your body would slump, limp and unresponsive, as if all strength had been drained from you. The priests would gently lift you from the tripod, their hands practiced and respectful, and carry you away, The recovery from a prophetic session was as grueling as the trance itself. You would be taken to a quiet room, away from the prying eyes of the supplicants, and allowed to rest. The headache would be pounding, a relentless drumbeat behind your eyes. Your muscles would ache, as if you had run a marathon. Your throat would be raw and sore from the guttural sounds that had escaped it. You might sleep for hours, a deep, dreamless sleep of pure exhaustion. When you finally woke, you would feel disoriented, detached from the experience, often with no memory of what you had said or done during the trance. It was as if another entity had temporarily inhabited your body, leaving behind only the physical aftermath. This detachment, this lack of memory, was crucial. It reinforced the belief that it was truly Apollo speaking, not the mortal woman. You, the Pythia, were merely the empty vessel, a conduit for the divine. This separation, however, also contributed to the profound isolation of your existence. You could not share the burden of the prophecies, could not understand their implications, could not even recall the words that had shaped the destinies of nations. Your life was lived in a constant state of preparation and recovery, punctuated by these violent, bewildering intrusions of the divine. The routine of service as Pythia was relentless. While specific days of prophecy were traditionally set, powerful supplicants or urgent matters could sometimes lead to additional sessions. You would always be on call, always in a state of readiness, always aware that at any moment, the divine hand of Apollo might reach down and pull you into the profound, disturbing trance. There was no escape, no true privacy, no return to the simple life you once knew. Your existence was now defined by this sacred burden, this terrifying intimacy with the divine. The psychological toll would be immense. To be constantly in a state of purification, of readiness, of isolation, unable to truly connect with the world around you, yet bearing the weight of its most profound questions. To experience these disturbing trances, to feel your body contort and your mind empty, only to awaken with no memory of the words that could change the course of history. It would be an existence of profound disassociation, a life lived on the precipice between the human and the divine, with little true understanding of either. A less-known fact is that some Pythias were said to serve for decades, their health often declining over time, possibly due to the constant strain of the trances or exposure to the suspected gases. You might wonder about the women who served alongside you, the older priestesses who guided you. Did they remember their own first trances? Did they ever truly grow accustomed to the unsettling nature of the prophetic experience? Their faces, though serene, often carried a deep, almost ancient weariness, a quiet acceptance of a life lived for the gods. They were your only companions in this strange, isolated existence, bound by a shared, sacred secret that separated you from all other mortals. You were revered, yes, but also fundamentally set apart, a living enigma even to yourself. The experience of being a Pythia was not one of serene, meditative contemplation. It was a disturbing, physically demanding, and psychologically isolating ordeal. It was a role that demanded the complete surrender of self, a profound sacrifice of individual identity for the sake of divine communication. You were the mouthpiece of a god, but that role came at a price that only the Pythia herself could truly know. The whispers of the past, the echoes of the Pythia's disturbing trances, still resonate through the sacred valley of Delphi, a reminder of the awe-inspiring yet terrifying power of prophecy, the adyton, the sacred inner sanctum where you, the Pythia, sit perched upon the tripod, is a place of profound significance, not just for you, but for all of ancient Greece. It's a small, windowless chamber, carved from the very rock of Mount Parnassus, imbued with a palpable sense of ancient power. The air, as you breathe deeply, is still heavy with the sweet, dizzying scent of the pneuma, the mysterious vapor believed to be Apollo's very breath. This constant exposure session after session subtly alters your state, blurring the lines between conscious thought and something far older. Far deeper, the priests of Apollo stand silently around you, their faces unreadable, yet their presence is a constant, watchful pressure. They are not merely observers, they are the gatekeepers, the guardians of the oracle, and the crucial bridge between your divinely inspired utterances and the mortal world outside. Their solemn expressions reflect the immense responsibility they bear, for it is their interpretation that will ultimately shape the supplicant's understanding of Apollo's will. You hear the hushed murmur of their prayers, low and rhythmic, weaving into the growing hum within your own mind. As the pneuma takes deeper hold, the sensory experience intensifies. The flickering oil lamps in the chamber seem to spin, their light forming dizzying patterns on the rough stone walls. The very air around you feels alive, vibrating with an unseen energy. Your skin tingles, 1,000 tiny prickles spreading from your core to your fingertips. This isn't a gentle, meditative state. It's a profound, almost violent transformation. Your body might begin to tremble, a subtle tremor that grows into uncontrolled spasms. Your head lolls, your eyes roll back, and a guttural groan might escape your lips, a prelude to the words that are about to come, your own thoughts, your memories, your individual identity. Feel as if they are being stripped away, dissolved by the overwhelming influx of divine energy. It's a terrifying process. This forced emptying of self. You become a hollow vessel, a conduit, waiting to be filled. Images flash across your inner vision, not as coherent scenes, but as fleeting, vivid fragments: a ship tossed on stormy seas, a city wall crumbling, a distant, smiling face, sounds distorted and echoing. Fill your ears the clash of bronze shields, the rustling of dry leaves, the distant bleating of sheep. It's a chaotic symphony, yet somewhere within it, lies the divine message. Then, the words burst forth. They are not formed by your conscious mind, nor spoken in your own voice. They are guttural, strained, sometimes a rapid-fire torrent, sometimes a slow, drawn-out groan. The language is ancient Greek, yes, but often archaic, filled with obscure metaphors, riddles, and poetic ambiguities. You might speak of a wooden wall saving Athens, or a mother's tears bringing sorrow, or a hero's blood fertilizing the earth. These are not phrases you would typically use, Wayne, and you have no understanding of their profound significance, even as they escape your lips. You are merely the instrument, the voice box through which the god articulates his cryptic wisdom, the priests. With their training and profound knowledge of Apollonian tradition, work frantically to transcribe every syllable. They are the crucial interpreters, tasked with making sense of the gods' often baffling pronouncements. Their interpretation isn't a simple translation. It's an act of profound theological and political discernment. A single word, a subtle emphasis, can alter the entire meaning of a prophecy, potentially changing the course of history. Scholars have spent centuries debating the true extent of priestly influence on the final prophecies, with some arguing for significant manipulation, while others suggest they merely clarified truly ambiguous divine utterances. This enduring academic discussion highlights the complex interplay between spiritual belief and human agency at Delphi. Imagine the supplicants waiting outside, beyond the Adyton. Perhaps it's a delegation from Sparta, seeking advice on a looming war with their ancient rivals. Athens, or a wealthy merchant, anxious about a dangerous sea voyage. Their questions, whispered with reverence and desperate hope, would be relayed to the priests, who would then pose them to you in your trance. And your response, delivered in fragmented divine language, would carry the weight of their entire future. The air would be thick with tension, the supplicants straining to hear, to glean any scrap of meaning from the mysterious sounds emanating from within the sacred chamber. The Pythia's trance is not a brief affair. It can last for minutes, sometimes even stretching into hours. An agonizing ordeal for your physical body. The intense muscular contractions, the rapid, ragged breathing, the sheer mental strain of being a vessel for a divine entity, it all exacts a terrible toll. You are not simply speaking, you are channeling, a living conduit for an immense, intangible force. When the flow of words finally ceases, a deep, shuddering gasp would escape your lips, and your body would slump, drained and lifeless, as if all strength had been completely consumed. The priests, with practiced solemnity, would then gently lift your limp form from the tripod and carry you away from the sacred chamber. The aftermath of a prophetic session is a period of profound exhaustion and disorientation. You would be taken to a quiet, secluded room within the temple complex, away from the prying eyes of the waiting supplicants and the curious glances of other temple attendants. Here you would be allowed to rest, to recover from the ordeal. A pounding headache would be your constant companion, a relentless throb behind your eyes. Your muscles would ache as if you had run a marathon, every fiber of your being protesting the exertion. Your throat would be raw and sore from the guttural sounds that had escaped it. You might sleep for hours, a deep, dreamless slumber born of pure physical and mental depletion. When you finally awaken, there is often no memory of what transpired during the trance. The words spoken, the visions seen, the profound connection to the divine all erased from your conscious mind. This amnesia, this detachment, is crucial. It reinforces the belief that it was truly Apollo speaking, not the mortal woman. You, the Pythia, were merely the empty vessel, a temporary dwelling for the god's voice. This separation, however, contributes significantly to the profound isolation of your existence. You cannot share the burden of the prophecies, cannot understand their implications, cannot even recall the words that have shaped the destinies of nations. Your life is lived in a constant cycle of preparation and recovery, punctuated by these violent, bewildering intrusions of the divine. The routine of service as Pythia is relentless. While specific days of prophecy were traditionally set, powerful supplicants or urgent matters could sometimes lead to additional sessions. You are always on call, always in a state of readiness, always aware that at any moment, the divine hand of Apollo might reach down and pull you into the profound, disturbing trance. There is no true escape, no genuine privacy, no return to the simple life you once knew. Your existence is now defined by this sacred burden, this terrifying intimacy with the divine. A fascinating yet disturbing detail of the Pythia's life is that some women served for many years, their bodies and minds visibly affected by the constant strain, leading to speculation that the pneuma or the trances themselves caused long-term health deterioration. The psychological toll would be immense. To be constantly purified, constantly ready, constantly isolated, unable to truly connect with the world around you, yet bearing the weight of its most profound questions. To experience these disturbing trances, to feel your body contort and your mind empty, only to awaken with no memory of the words that could change the course of history. It is an existence of profound disassociation, a life lived on the precarious precipice between the human and the divine, with little true understanding of either realm. You are revered, yes, almost worshipped, but you are also fundamentally set apart, a living enigma even to yourself. You might wonder about the other women who served as Pythias before you, or those who served alongside you in the temple. Did they too experience this profound emptiness, this terrifying surrender of self? Did they ever truly grow accustomed to the unsettling nature of the prophetic experience? Their faces, though serene, often carry a deep, almost ancient weariness, a quiet acceptance of a life lived solely for the gods. They are your only companions in this strange, isolated existence, bound by a shared, sacred secret that separates you from all other mortals. You are a living paradox, both worshipped and unseen, profoundly influential yet utterly powerless over your own destiny. The whispers of the past, the echoes of the Pythia's disturbing trances, still resonate through the sacred valley of Delphi, a haunting reminder of the awe-inspiring, yet terrifying power of prophecy. The supplicants arriving at Delphi were not ordinary travelers. They were kings, generals, city ambassadors, wealthy merchants, and desperate individuals, all bearing gifts and profound questions. Their journeys to this isolated, sacred site on the slopes of Mount Parnassus would have been arduous, often spanning weeks or even months across treacherous seas and dusty roads. They would have arrived, weary yet filled with a mix of awe and profound anxiety, knowing that the fate of their battles, their harvests, their very lives, hinged on the cryptic words whispered through your lips. As Pythia, you would rarely, if ever, see these supplicants directly, especially not in your trance state. They would wait outside the Adyton, in the main part of the Temple of Apollo, their faces etched with anticipation and worry. Their questions, meticulously prepared and often inscribed on lead tablets, would be presented to the high priests. These priests, acting as intermediaries, would then convey the questions to you, the Pythia, in the inner sanctum. This layered process further emphasized your divine removal from the mortal world, reinforcing the belief that you were merely a vessel, not an active participant in the interaction. The questions themselves were rarely simple. They were complex, often politically charged, and deeply personal. A city-state might inquire whether to declare war on a powerful neighbor, or where to establish a new colony across the sea. A general might ask about the outcome of an impending battle. A private citizen, perhaps less common but still permitted, might seek guidance on a marriage or a business venture. The weight of these questions, known only to the priests who conveyed them, was immense. You, in your trance, would be oblivious to their specific nature, yet the divine response would flow through you, unbidden and unfiltered by your conscious mind. As the pneuma continued its subtle, intoxicating work within the Adyton, you would feel yourself slipping deeper into the trance. The initial physical tremors might subside into a profound stillness, punctuated by sudden, involuntary movements or guttural sounds. The images flashing through your inner vision would grow more intense, more chaotic, yet imbued with a strange, compelling significance. You might see flocks of birds flying in an unnatural pattern, or the glint of sunlight on a distant spear, or the sudden blooming of an ancient tree. These were the visual components of the divine message, translated by Apollo into a form your mortal mind could process, however briefly and unconsciously. Then, the prophetic utterances would begin, seemingly without your own volition. The sounds would emerge from your throat, often fragmented, perhaps a series of syllables, a poetic line, or a string of seemingly disconnected words. The tone might vary wildly: a low moan, a sudden, sharp cry, or a rapid, almost frantic torrent of sound. The language, while ancient Greek, would be highly symbolic, filled with metaphors, allegories, and cryptic allusions. You might declare, "When the foe shall cross the border of Attica, then a wooden wall shall save you." Or, "Seek the place where the earth drinks blood, and there shall victory be found." The priests, poised with their styluses and wax tablets, would diligently transcribe every single sound that escaped your lips. This was a challenging task. Given the often disjointed and frenzied nature of your speech during the trance, they had to be quick, precise, and utterly devoted to capturing the unadulterated essence of Apollo's message. This process highlights a fascinating aspect of Delphi, the interplay between divine inspiration and human interpretation. Without the priests, your utterances would be nothing more than the ravings of a disturbed woman. With them, they became the sacred guiding words of a god. Once the trance subsided and you were gently carried away for recovery, the real work for the priests would begin. They would take your raw, often incomprehensible utterances and painstakingly piece them together. They would analyze the metaphors, ponder the allusions, and apply their profound knowledge of Apollonian theology, Greek mythology, and current political affairs. Their task was to distill the divine chaos into coherent, albeit still ambiguous, pronouncements that could be understood, debated, and acted upon by the supplicants. Some modern scholars argue that the priests, with their extensive networks and political savvy, often subtly guided the prophecies to align with their own interpretations of what was best for Greece. Though this remains a hotly debated point of academic contention, the ambiguity of the prophecies was a hallmark of Delphi, and indeed a crucial part of its enduring power. Apollo rarely gave a straightforward answer. This ambiguity served several purposes. Firstly, it allowed the oracle to maintain its infallibility. If a prophecy seemed to fail, it was simply because the supplicant or the priest had misinterpreted Apollo's deeper meaning. Secondly, it forced the supplicants to engage actively with the prophecy, to debate its meaning, and to take ownership of their subsequent actions. The god provided guidance, but ultimate responsibility remained with humanity. A classic example is the story of King Croesus of Lydia, who, upon asking if he should invade Persia, was told that if he did, a great empire would fall. He interpreted this as his enemy's empire, but it turned out to be his own. The sheer volume of people seeking prophecies was immense. Pilgrims would travel from far-flung corners of the Greek world, from Magna Graecia in Italy to the distant shores of Asia Minor. The waiting list for an oracular session could be long, stretching for weeks or even months. This constant flow of visitors transformed Delphi into more than just a religious center. It became a vibrant hub of political and cultural exchange. You, however, in your secluded life as Pythia, would be largely unaware of this bustling activity outside the temple walls. Your world was the sacred precinct, the adyton, and the profound, disturbing communion with the divine. The influence of the oracle was truly staggering. City-states would consult Delphi before founding new colonies, seeking divine approval for their ventures. Generals would consult before embarking on military campaigns, believing Apollo's blessing was essential for victory. Legislators would seek guidance on crafting new laws, ensuring their policies aligned with divine will. The oracle's pronouncements could sway alliances, prevent wars, or even spark them. It was a potent force in the ancient world, shaping the very fabric of Greek society and its interactions. It's a fascinating, if somewhat disturbing, thought that the trajectory of ancient Greek civilization was, to a significant extent, steered by the utterances of a woman in a trance. Interpreted by priests, the financial aspect of Delphi was also significant. Supplicants were required to offer substantial gifts and fees to the temple, contributing to its immense wealth. This wealth funded the construction of elaborate treasuries by various city-states, monumental statues, and the maintenance of the vast temple complex. While you, as Pythia, lived a life of austerity within the temple, the institution you served was one of the wealthiest and most powerful in the ancient world, a testament to the enduring human need for divine guidance and the lengths people would go to obtain it. The life of a Pythia was one of profound sacrifice. You forfeited your personal life, your family, your identity, for a sacred duty that was both revered and deeply unsettling. Your body was a tool, a vessel, pushed to its physical and mental limits during the trances. Your mind, though spared the memory of the prophecies, was still subjected to the constant psychological strain of isolation, purification rituals, and the terrifying knowledge of the power that flowed through you. There was no retirement for a Pythia, only continued service until age, illness, or death claimed you. Sometimes, a Pythia might die during a particularly intense trance, as some ancient accounts suggest. While not a common occurrence, the possibility hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the physical danger inherent in channeling the divine. Imagine the awe and fear that such an event would inspire a woman consumed entirely by the god, her mortal coil unable to withstand the overwhelming divine energy. These rare, tragic events would only further solidify the mystique and terrifying power of the Delphic Oracle, the enduring mystery of the Pythia's trance. Whether solely a psychological phenomenon or genuinely induced by intoxicating geological gases, continues to fascinate and perplex. Early archaeologists, dismissive of ancient accounts, found no evidence of fissures, but later geological surveys revealed active fault lines beneath the temple. This tantalizing discovery reignited the debate, suggesting that perhaps the ancients weren't so far-fetched after all. Regardless of the exact scientific explanation, the belief in the Numa's power was central to the oracle's function, and your daily, disturbing reality as Pythia, the life of a Pythia, yours, was not a serene, contemplative existence as often depicted in romanticized retellings. It was a life of profound personal sacrifice, a gradual erosion of your individual identity in service to a demanding, often disturbing, divine purpose. Every aspect of your existence, and from your diet to your social interactions, was meticulously controlled, designed to maintain your ritual purity and readiness for the trance. This constant state of preparation, punctuated by the violent intrusions of the divine, took an immense toll on your mind and body. Your daily routine was a stark contrast to the life you once knew. Gone were the simple rhythms of village life, the shared laughter with family and friends, the autonomy of making your own choices. Now, your days were structured around purification rituals. You would participate in ritual baths, perhaps multiple times a day, in the icy waters of the Castalian spring. A shock to the system meant to cleanse both body and spirit. You would choose sacred laurel leaves, their bitter taste a constant presence in your mouth, believed to enhance your connection to Apollo. Your diet was simple, austere, devoid of rich foods or wine, intended to keep your body pure and receptive. This relentless focus on ritual cleanliness meant a constant awareness of your physical state. A hypervigilance that was mentally exhausting, the isolation was perhaps the most profound burden. You lived within the confines of the temple complex, rarely venturing outside its sacred walls. Your only regular companions were the other priestesses, older women who had endured similar fates, their faces often etched with a quiet, ancient weariness. They served as your mentors, guiding you through the complex rituals and preparing you for the demands of the trance. But even with them, true intimacy was impossible. Your role set you apart, making genuine human connection a rare and precious commodity. You were revered, almost worshipped, but fundamentally alone. It's a point of contention among sociological historians whether this enforced isolation contributed to the Pythia's altered mental states, making them more susceptible to hypnotic suggestion or self-induced trances. The psychological burden was immense. Imagine living with the constant knowledge that at any moment, your body might be seized by a divine force, your voice used to utter words whose meaning you would never comprehend. The trances themselves were not peaceful meditations. They were violent, physically demanding events. The contortions of your limbs, the guttural sounds, the rapid breathing, these were physical manifestations of the immense energy coursing through you. The subsequent amnesia, while perhaps a blessing in preventing you from remembering the unsettling experience, also meant a profound disassociation from your own actions. You were a powerful conduit, yet utterly powerless over yourself. This disassociation could be deeply unsettling. To speak words that shape the destinies of kings and cities, yet to have no recollection of them. To know that profound wisdom flowed through you, yet to remain ignorant of its content, it created a strange rift within your own being. A sense of being both everything and nothing. Your personal identity, once distinct and cherished, slowly eroded, replaced by the collective identity of Pythia, the vessel of Apollo. There was no personal life, no individual aspirations. Your existence was entirely subsumed by your sacred duty. The physical toll was also significant. The repeated exposure to the pneuma, whatever its composition, combined with the extreme physical and mental strain of the trances, surely had long-term effects on your health. While ancient sources don't offer detailed medical records, the accounts of Pythia serving for many years, their health visibly declining, suggest a cumulative impact. Perhaps constant headaches, chronic fatigue, or respiratory issues were common ailments among those who served for decades. It's a sobering thought that the very act of divine communication was slowly but surely consuming the mortal vessel. You might sometimes glimpse the supplicants as they approach the temple complex. Their faces a mixture of awe, hope, and profound anxiety. They had traveled great distances, often bringing valuable offerings, their futures hanging in the balance. You would see the weight of their expectations, the desperate hope in their eyes, and feel the immense pressure of their unspoken pleas. Even though you wouldn't consciously interact with them during the trance, their profound need would be a palpable presence. Adding to the psychological weight you carried, the priests, your constant companions, were the only ones who truly understood the complexities of your role. They had witnessed countless trances, interpreted countless prophecies. Their faces were often serene, but their eyes held a deep, knowing weariness, suggesting a profound understanding of the burden you carried. They were your guides, your protectors, and your jailers, all at once. Their control over the interpretation of the prophecies also meant they wielded immense power, a power derived directly from your unsettling ability. A less frequently discussed aspect is the potential for the priest to manipulate the Pythia's words, perhaps subtly guiding them towards politically advantageous interpretations. This remains a topic of considerable academic debate, highlighting the complex dynamics of power within the oracle structure. The constant state of readiness was exhausting. Even when there was no immediate session scheduled, you were always in a state of purification, of contemplation, of preparation. Apollo, it was believed, could choose to speak at any time, through any Pythia. There was no true downtime, no moment when you could truly relax and be yourself. Your life was a perpetual vigil, an endless waiting for the divine impulse. This constant vigilance would lead to a profound sense of anxiety, a feeling that you were always on the precipice of a momentous event. The enduring influence of Delphi, and by extension, your role as Pythia, was truly remarkable. Kings sought your counsel before wars, city-states before founding colonies, individuals before major life decisions. The oracle's words, once interpreted by the priests, became law, guidance, or justification for countless actions across the Greek world. Imagine the weight of that responsibility, the knowledge that your utterances, however unconsciously delivered, could decide the fate of thousands. You were a linchpin of the ancient world, a source of authority far exceeding any mortal king or general. Yet, despite this immense influence, your personal agency was virtually non-existent. You had no voice in the decisions made based on your prophecies, no role in the political maneuvering they inspired. You were a tool, a sacred instrument, revered for your utility but denied any individual will. This paradox, immense power channeled through utter personal powerlessness, was the defining characteristic of the Pythia's disturbing existence. You were the mouthpiece of a god, but that also meant you were not truly your own. The legends surrounding the Pythia's trance often emphasized its mystique, but they also hinted at its disturbing nature. The idea that a god would violently possess a human body, forcing sounds and visions from it, was not a gentle spiritual communion, but a powerful, overwhelming invasion. This raw, untamed aspect of the divine was a source of both awe and terror for the ancients. And for you, the one experiencing it, it was a profound, recurring trauma. A particularly unsettling, though perhaps anecdotal detail is that some ancient writers describe the Pythia's hair standing on end, and her face becoming distorted during the deepest trances. Further emphasizing the physical torment, the decline of the oracle, though distant from your time, was an inevitable consequence of shifting beliefs and political landscapes. As Christianity rose and the Roman Empire exerted its influence, the traditional polytheistic practices of Greece began to wane. The oracle's power diminished. Its prophecies became less frequent, its influence less pronounced. Eventually, it would fall silent, a relic of a bygone era. But for generations, you and the women who served before and after you were the beating heart of this sacred institution, the living bridge to the gods. Your life, though outwardly simple and secluded within the temple walls, was one of unparalleled intensity and profound personal cost. You were a testament to the human desire for divine guidance and the disturbing lengths to which society would go to obtain it. The whispers of the pneuma, the contortions of the trance, the weight of a world's questions, these were the grim realities of being an oracle at Delphi. You were the Pythia, and your disturbing truth echoes through the centuries, a reminder of the awe-inspiring yet terrifying power of prophecy. The ritual preparation for an oracular session at Delphi was not merely symbolic. It was a rigorous, often unsettling process designed to heighten your senses, purify your body, and open your mind to the divine influx. As Pythia, you were subjected to these rituals on the appointed days of prophecy, typically the 7th day of the Delphian month, a day sacred to Apollo. Yet, even on other days, a constant state of ritual purity was maintained, a perpetual readiness for the gods' unexpected call. This continuous state of purification meant a life lived with extreme self-awareness. Every action, every consumption, meticulously scrutinized. The first step in your preparation, after awakening from a brief, restless slumber, was the ritual bath in the Castalian spring. Located just outside the temple complex, its waters were notoriously icy cold, even on the warmest days. You would walk, perhaps barefoot, over the uneven ground to the spring, the pre-dawn chill biting at your skin. The sudden shock of the frigid water as you immersed yourself would be jarring, a violent jolt to your system that was believed to cleanse not just the physical body, but also purify the spirit, washing away any lingering mortal impurities that might hinder your divine connection. It was a painful, invigorating baptism, a forceful awakening that prepared you for the profound experience ahead. After the cleansing bath, you would return to the temple precincts, where the next stage of purification awaited. You would be given laurel leaves, sacred to Apollo, to chew. The leaves, bitter and aromatic, would fill your mouth with their sharp, acrid taste. Ancient beliefs held that ingesting the laurel, a plant strongly associated with the god, would further enhance your prophetic abilities, opening your mind to divine visions and utterances. You would chew them slowly, methodically, the bitterness a constant, earthy presence that settled deep in your throat, preparing your inner being for the sacred experience. Following the laurel, you might also drink from the sacred Casiotis spring, another vital component of the purification rites. Its cool, unclear waters were thought to soothe and calm your internal organs, preparing your body to receive the powerful pneuma without succumbing to immediate collapse. The combination of the icy spring water and the bitter laurel would create a potent physical sensation, a blend of invigoration and unsettling internal awareness, pushing you further from your normal mortal state. Mortal. Finally, dressed in simple, flowing white robes, a symbol of purity and detachment. From worldly concerns, you would be led by the high priest to the temple of Apollo itself. The air inside the temple would be thick with the scent of burning incense, sweet and heady, intended to purify the sacred space and calm the senses of the supplicants waiting in the outer chambers. The low, rhythmic chanting of hymns, performed by the priests and temple attendants, would fill the air, creating an atmosphere of intense reverence and profound anticipation. You would feel the weight of countless unseen eyes upon you, the hopeful, desperate gazes of those who had traveled great distances to seek Apollo's wisdom. Their lives, their futures, hinged on the words that would soon issue from your lips. The climax of the pre-trance ritual, and perhaps the most unsettling for you, was the ritual with the goat. A goat, chosen for its purity and pristine condition, would be led before the altar. Cold water would then be sprinkled over its head. The priest would watch intently. If the goat shivered, it was believed to be a favorable omen, a sign that Apollo was willing to speak through you that day. If the goat remained impassive, showing no reaction to the cold water, the session would be postponed, a profound disappointment for the waiting supplicants and a source of quiet anxiety for you. Imagine the pressure, the immense unspoken burden as you stood there, watching a simple animal, knowing that its involuntary bodily reaction determined whether the god would grant his presence. It was a strangely mundane yet deeply symbolic act, bridging the gap between the earthly and the divine, yet placing an almost unbearable weight of expectation on a creature, and by extension, on you. Once the omens were declared favorable, you would be led to the Adyton, the most sacred and restricted inner sanctum of the temple. This small, often subterranean chamber, carved into the very rock of the mountain, was forbidden to all but the Pythia and the high priests. Here, perched on the tripod, a three-legged stool of cold, hard bronze, you would await the true onset of the trance. This tripod, a simple seat, was the very nexus of the mortal and divine, the conduit through which Apollo's power was believed to flow. The air in the Adyton was noticeably different. It felt heavier, thicker, almost charged. And then there was the distinctive, sometimes faint, sometimes overpowering, sweet yet dizzying scent of the pneuma. This mysterious vapor believed to emanate from a fissure deep within the earth beneath the temple was the catalyst for your trance. As you began to breathe deeply, as instructed, the intoxicating vapor would fill your lungs, its profound effects quickly taking hold. While ancient accounts consistently mention the pneuma, modern scientific consensus is more nuanced. Early archaeologists famously dismissed the idea of gas-emitting fissures as mythical, but later geological surveys in the late 20th century revealed active fault lines beneath the temple, capable of releasing light, intoxicating gases like ethylene. This scientific discovery reignited the age-old debate, lending a surprising degree of credence to the ancient descriptions of the Pythia's trance-inducing environment. This ongoing academic discussion continues to puzzle scientists and historians alike. As the pneuma deepened its hold, the world around you would begin to warp. The flickering oil lamps in the small chamber would seem to swim, their light distorting into halos of hazy yellow. The hushed whispers of the priest would become distant echoes, as if heard from underwater, their forms blurring at the edges of your vision. A profound stillness would settle over you, a quiet that was unnerving in its intensity, even as an inner tremor began to build within your own body. Your limbs might feel strangely light, almost ethereal, yet simultaneously heavy, rooted to the spot by some unseen, immense force. A strange warmth would spread through your limbs, followed by a prickling, tingling sensation, as if countless tiny needles were dancing on your skin. This was the unmistakable onset of the trance, the moment when the mortal world truly began to recede, and the divine connection solidified. You would struggle, subconsciously, to hold on to your thoughts, to your own identity, but it would be a futile effort. It was like trying to grasp smoke with your bare hands. Your personal memories, your individual desires, your very sense of self all would begin to unravel, to dissolve, replaced by a vast buzzing emptiness. Images, fragmented and overwhelmingly vivid, would flash before your inner eye, fleeting glimpses of distant lands, faces you'd never seen, symbols that held no immediate meaning in your waking life. Sounds, disembodied and ethereal, would echo in your ears the distant clang of unseen battles, the mournful murmur of a distant sea, the rustling of ancient leaves in a forgotten grove. It was an overwhelming sensory overload, yet paradoxically, it brought with it a profound, almost blissful sense of detachment. Then, the words, they would not be your words, not your voice. They would emerge from deep within your chest, guttural and strained. Sometimes a whisper so low it was barely audible. Sometimes a sudden, piercing shout. The language might be ancient Greek, but twisted, fragmented, filled with obscure metaphors and archaic phrasing that even the most learned scholar would struggle to decipher without aid. The words would tumble out, disconnected yet imbued with profound meaning. Speaking of futures and past, of choices and consequences, of victories and defeats, you would be merely the conduit, the vessel through which the gods' wisdom flowed, having no conscious control over what was said, and certainly no understanding of its deeper implications. The priests, with their styluses poised over wax tablets, would diligently transcribe every sound, every syllable that escaped your lips. This was a challenging and critical task. Given the often disjointed, rapid, and frenzied nature of your speech during the deepest stages of the trance, they had to be quick, precise, and utterly devoted to capturing the unadulterated essence of Apollo's divine message. This intense collaboration highlights a fundamental aspect of the Oracle of Delphi. It was a profound interplay between raw divine inspiration and meticulous human interpretation. Without the priests, your utterances would indeed be nothing more than the bewildering ravings of a disturbed woman. With them, they became the sacred, guiding words that shaped the course of ancient Greek civilization. Once the trance had subsided, and the last guttural sounds had faded from your lips, a profound stillness would descend upon the Adyton. You would slump on the tripod, your body utterly drained, limp and unresponsive. The immense energy that had coursed through you, the powerful influx of the pneuma, would have left you utterly depleted. The priests, with their practiced solemnity and careful hands, would then gently lift your unresponsive form from the bronze stool. They would carry you away from the sacred chamber, back to a private, secluded room within the temple complex, where you could begin the arduous process of recovery. The immediate aftermath of a prophetic session was always a period of intense physical and mental exhaustion. A pounding headache would be your constant companion, a relentless drumbeat behind your eyes that made even the dim light of your recovery room unbearable. Your muscles would ache as if you had engaged in a brutal physical struggle, every fiber of your being protesting the exertion. Your throat would be raw and sore from the unearthly sounds that had escaped it, a physical manifestation of the god's powerful voice. You might shiver, even in the warmth of your covers, a residual tremor from the intense spiritual experience. Sleep, when it finally came, would be a deep, almost comatose slumber, a necessary escape from the overwhelming sensory and psychological assault. You would drift into a realm of pure oblivion, often for hours, a dreamless void where the sounds and visions of the trance could not follow. This profound sleep was your body's way of coping, of attempting to reset after such an extraordinary ordeal. When you finally awakened, it would be with a sense of disorientation, a profound confusion about your surroundings and the passage of time. Crucially, you would awaken with no memory of what transpired during the trance. The words spoken, the visions seen, the profound connection to the divine, all erased from your conscious mind. This amnesia was not merely a side effect. It was believed to be a fundamental aspect of the Pythia's function, reinforcing the belief that it was truly Apollo speaking through you, not the mortal woman. You were merely the empty vessel, a temporary dwelling for the god's voice. This detachment, however, contributed significantly to the profound isolation of your existence. You could not share the burden of the prophecies, could not understand their implications, could not even recall the words that had shaped the destinies of nations. Your life was lived in a constant cycle of preparation and recovery, punctuated by these violent, bewildering intrusions of the divine. Archaeological evidence, such as ancient inscriptions and architectural layouts, reveals the meticulous planning of the Delphic sanctuary to facilitate these rituals, reinforcing the belief in their sacred efficacy. This disassociation created a strange rift within your own being. To speak words that determine the fate of kings and the course of empires, yet to have no recollection of them. to know that profound wisdom flowed through you, yet to remain utterly ignorant of its content. It was a paradox that defined your existence, immense power channeled through utter personal powerlessness. Your individual identity, once distinct and cherished, slowly eroded, subsumed by the collective identity of Pythia, the vessel of Apollo. There was no personal life, no individual aspirations. Your entire existence was dedicated to this sacred, consuming duty. The physical toll of this life was immense. The repeated exposure to the pneuma, whatever its true composition, combined with the extreme physical and mental strain of the trances, surely had long-term effects on your health. While ancient medical texts are scarce and not directly related to Pythias, accounts from later historians suggest that Pythias, who served for many years, often exhibited signs of declining health, perhaps suffering from chronic headaches, severe fatigue, respiratory issues, or even neurological symptoms. It is a sobering thought that the very act of divine communication was slowly but surely consuming the mortal vessel, grinding it down under the weight of its extraordinary purpose. You might sometimes glimpse the supplicants as they departed from the temple complex, their faces now a mixture of relief, contemplation, and renewed determination. They had received their divine guidance, however cryptic, and were now tasked with interpreting and acting upon it. You would see the weight of their decisions, the desperate hope in their eyes, and feel the immense unspoken pressure of their profound needs. Even though you would never consciously interact with them during the trance, their profound need was a palpable presence, adding to the psychological weight you carried. It's a strange feeling to be so central to the world's most important decisions, yet so removed from their consequences. The priests, your constant companions and guardians, were the only ones who truly understood the intricacies of your role. They had witnessed countless trances, interpreted countless prophecies. Their faces were often serene, but their eyes held a deep, knowing weariness, suggesting a profound understanding of the profound burden you carried. They were your guides, your protectors, and, in a way, your jailers all at once. Their control over the interpretation of the prophecies also meant they wielded immense power, a power derived directly from your unsettling, divinely granted ability. Modern scholars often debate the extent to which the priests might have subtly guided or even manipulated the Pythia's words to align with their own political or social agendas, creating a fascinating and enduring academic discussion about the true nature of power at Delphi. The constant state of readiness was psychologically exhausting. Even when no immediate session was scheduled, you were always in a state of ritual purification, of deep contemplation, of unwavering preparation. Apollo, it was believed, could choose to speak at any time, through any Pythia, often unpredictably. There was no true downtime, no moment when you could truly relax and simply be yourself. Your life was a perpetual vigil, an endless waiting for the next divine impulse, the next terrifying summons to the adjutant. This constant vigilance would lead to a profound sense of anxiety, a persistent feeling that you were always on the precipice of a momentous event. The enduring influence of Delphi, and by extension, your role as Pythia, was truly remarkable. Kings sought your counsel before declaring wars, city-states before founding new colonies, individuals before making major life decisions. The oracle's words, once interpreted by the priests, became law, divine guidance, or crucial justification for countless actions across the entire Greek world. Imagine the immense weight of that responsibility. The knowledge that your utterances, however unconsciously delivered, could decide the fate of thousands, alter the course of history, and reshape the geopolitical landscape of the ancient world. You were a linchpin of the ancient world, a source of authority far exceeding any mortal king or general. Yet, despite this immense influence, your personal agency was virtually non-existent. You had no voice in the decisions made based on your prophecies, no role in the political maneuvering they inspired. You were a tool, a sacred instrument, revered for your utility but denied any individual will. This profound paradox, immense power channeled through utter personal powerlessness, was the defining characteristic of the Pythia's disturbing existence. You were the mouthpiece of a god, but that also meant you were not truly your own. It was a life of ultimate servitude, a profound sacrifice of self for a greater, divine purpose. The legends surrounding the Pythia's trance often emphasized its mystique, but they also hinted at its disturbing, violent nature. The idea that a god would violently possess a human body, forcing sounds and visions from it, was not a gentle, spiritual communion, but a powerful, overwhelming invasion. This raw, untamed aspect of the divine was a source of both awe and terror for the ancients, and for you, the one experiencing it, it was a profound, recurring trauma. It's an intriguing, if slightly grotesque, detail that some ancient writers described the Pythia's body convulsing violently, her hair disheveled, and her face distorted by the powerful influx of the pneuma during the deepest trances, further emphasizing the intense physical and psychological ordeal. The decline of the Oracle, though distant from your immediate concern, was an inevitable consequence of shifting religious beliefs and political landscapes. As Christianity rose and the Roman Empire exerted its influence, the traditional polytheistic practices of Greece began to wane. The oracle's power diminished, its prophecies became less frequent, its influence less pronounced. Eventually, it would fall silent, a relic of a bygone era, its sacred chamber empty. But for generations, you and the women who served before and after you were the beating heart of this sacred institution, the living bridge to the gods, a silent, powerful testament to humanity's eternal quest for answers from the unknown. Your life, though outwardly simple and secluded within the temple walls, was one of unparalleled intensity and profound personal cost. You were a testament to the human desire for divine guidance, and the disturbing lengths to which society would go to obtain it. The whispers of the pneuma, the contortions of the trance, the weight of a world's questions, these were the grim realities of being an oracle at Delphi. You were the Pythia, and your disturbing truth echoes through the centuries, a reminder of the awe-inspiring, yet terrifying, power of prophecy. Even now, the ancient stones of Delphi seem to hum with the echoes of your voice, forever imprinted with the sacred, unsettling history of Apollo's oracle, the political and societal influence of the Delphic oracle, and by extension, your utterances as Pythia, was truly unparalleled in the ancient Greek world. Kings, generals, and city-states did not merely consult Delphi, they relied on it, believing Apollo's word was the ultimate authority, a divine stamp of approval or a dire warning that shaped their most critical decisions. This made your role, however unconsciously performed, profoundly central to the very fabric of Greek civilization. Imagine the high stakes involved. A city-state like Athens or Sparta might send a solemn delegation to Delphi, bearing lavish gifts and a question of immense consequence. Should we declare war on our powerful neighbor, Corinth? Or where should we establish a new colony to alleviate our growing population and find new resources? Your ambiguous reply, once interpreted by the priests, could lead to a monumental war that decimated thousands of lives, or the founding of a prosperous new city that flourished for centuries. The weight of these possibilities, even if you were consciously unaware of them, permeated the sacred space. Generals on the eve of pivotal battles would seek divine prognostication, convinced that Apollo's blessing was essential for victory. Imagine a general like Themistocles, before the Battle of Salamis, receiving your cryptic prophecy about a wooden wall saving Athens. His interpretation, a fleet of ships, led to one of the most decisive naval victories in history. Conversely, a misinterpretation, like that of King Croesus of Lydia, who, upon being told that invading Persia would cause a great empire to fall, optimistically assumed it would be the Persian one, only to see his own vast empire crumble, underscored the double-edged sword of Delphi's ambiguity. It's a truly fascinating historical irony that the oracle's ambiguity often forced supplicants to think critically and take ownership of their decisions, even while ostensibly seeking divine guidance. This intellectual engagement is a subject of ongoing academic discussion among classical historians. The oracle's influence extended beyond warfare and colonization. Legislators sought guidance when crafting new laws, hoping to imbue their policies with divine legitimacy. Judicial disputes, often complex and deeply personal, were sometimes brought before Apollo, seeking an impartial divine judgment. Even personal matters, though less common due to the cost and travel, found their way to Delphi, from questions about marriage and fertility to concerns about health and business ventures. This pervasive reach meant that the Pythia, through the priests, was woven into the intimate tapestry of ancient Greek life. Touching every strata of society, the financial aspect of Delphi further solidified its power. Supplicants were required to offer substantial gifts and pay significant fees to the temple for an oracular session. This constant influx of wealth transformed Delphi into one of the richest and most elaborate sanctuaries in the ancient world. The treasuries, built by various city-states to house their offerings, stood as monumental testaments to the oracle's economic clout. Statues of gold and bronze, intricate votive offerings, and vast sums of currency flowed into Apollo's coffers, funding the maintenance of the sprawling temple complex and supporting the numerous priests, priestesses, and attendants. While you, as Pythia, lived a life of austerity and ritual seclusion, the institution you served was a powerhouse of wealth and influence. This immense wealth also played a role in the political landscape. The priests of Delphi, as custodians of this wealth and interpreters of Apollo's word, wielded considerable political sway. They maintained extensive networks across the Greek world, gathering intelligence and influencing opinions. Their interpretations, while ostensibly divine, could subtly or overtly favor certain city-states, promote specific policies, or even discredit rivals. A less-known but intriguing detail is the role of the promentia, the right to consult the oracle before others, which was often granted to city-states as a political favor or for significant donations, effectively creating a tiered system of access to divine wisdom. This subtle manipulation of access and interpretation is a constant thread in the historical analysis of the oracle's power. The very ambiguity of the prophecies was, paradoxically, a source of its strength and longevity. By rarely giving a straightforward yes or no, Apollo's pronouncements maintained an aura of infallibility. If a prophecy seemed to fail, it was simply because the supplicant or the priest had misinterpreted its deeper, more complex meaning. This allowed the oracle to adapt to changing circumstances, to offer guidance that remained relevant, even when the initial interpretation proved flawed. It also placed the burden of responsibility firmly on the shoulders of the supplicants. Apollo offered wisdom, but humanity had to grapple with its application. This clever mechanism ensured Delphi's enduring relevance for centuries. Your life, consumed by rituals and trance states, allowed for no personal opinion or political bias. You were merely the conduit. Yet, the actions taken based on your unconscious utterances had profound, far-reaching consequences. You were a living paradox, a figure of immense influence, yet utterly devoid of personal agency. Your physical presence was revered, almost worshipped, but your individual will was entirely subsumed by the divine. This constant state of being a tool, a vessel, must have been profoundly unsettling, even with the amnesia that followed each trance. The psychological impact of this existence cannot be overstated. To be a part of such monumental decisions, to have kings and generals tremble before the words that flowed from your lips, yet to remain entirely ignorant of the details, to remember nothing of the experience, the constant physical demands of purification, the jarring effects of the pneuma, the violent convulsions of the trance, and the subsequent exhaustion. It was a life that systematically stripped away your humanity, leaving behind a husk that could channel the divine, Scholars have recently begun to explore the possibility of long-term psychological conditions, such as dissociative disorders or chronic trauma, among Pythias due to the unique stressors of their role. Though definitive evidence is difficult to obtain from ancient sources, the very structure of the oracle with you as the central, divine conduit, surrounded by a powerful priesthood of interpreters, created a formidable institution. It was a fusion of spiritual authority, political shrewdness, and profound human need. Delphi became the spiritual heart of the Greek world, the place where humans could, they believed, truly commune with the gods and gain foresight into their uncertain futures. It fostered a shared sense of Hellenic identity, as disparate city-states, often at war with each other, nonetheless united in their reverence for Apollo and his oracle. Even beyond the immediate Greek world, the oracle's fame spread. Rulers from distant lands, like the aforementioned King Croesus of Lydia, would send embassies to consult Delphi, demonstrating its reputation as a universal arbiter of fate. This international recognition further cemented its status as a unique and powerful force in the ancient Mediterranean, a beacon of prophecy in a world yearning for answers. Your life, though confined to the sacred precincts, was thus inextricably linked to the grand tapestry of ancient history. You were a silent participant in the rise and fall of empires, the forging of alliances, and the defining moments of ancient civilization. The words that tumbled from your mouth, seemingly random and chaotic in the moment, were carefully preserved and debated by generations of leaders and scholars, shaping the course of a world long past. The profound and disturbing reality of being the Pythia, a living, breathing link to the divine, was a burden, a sacred duty, and an unparalleled historical phenomenon. The echoes of Delphi's power, however resonant, were not eternal. As centuries passed, the once vibrant heart of the Greek world began to beat slower, gradually losing its immense influence until it finally fell silent. For you, as Pythia, this decline would have been a slow, almost imperceptible process, a gradual dimming of the divine light that once blazed so fiercely. The reasons for this decline were complex, a confluence of shifting religious landscapes, changing political powers, and perhaps even the physical toll on the very women who served. You might have noticed subtle changes first. Perhaps the queue of supplicants grew shorter, the once endless stream of kings and generals now just a trickle. The offerings, once lavish and gleaming, might become less frequent, less ostentatious. The bustling energy of the sanctuary, once a vibrant hub of activity, might gradually give way to a quieter, more subdued atmosphere. These were early, unsettling signs that the oracle's star, once so brilliant, was beginning to fade. One of the most significant factors in Delphi's decline was the rise of new philosophical schools and intellectual movements across the Greek world. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle began to emphasize human reason, logic, and empirical observation as paths to understanding the world, rather than relying solely on divine revelation. As their ideas gained traction, the absolute authority of oracular pronouncements began to be questioned. People sought answers within themselves, through rational inquiry, rather than from a disembodied voice in a trance. This shift in intellectual thought subtly eroded the foundation of belief that the oracle depended upon. It's a fascinating historical parallel that, as human knowledge expanded, the perceived need for direct divine intervention in daily affairs seemed to diminish, a trend that can be observed in various cultures throughout history. Another major contributing factor was the rise of new religious cults and beliefs, particularly the growing popularity of mystery religions and philosophical systems that offered a more personal connection to the divine, often promising salvation or a more direct path to understanding. These alternative spiritual paths offered experiences that differed from the formal, cryptic pronouncements of the Pythia, appealing to a populace seeking different forms of spiritual solace. The rigid, ancient rituals of Delphi, while powerful, may have seemed less relevant to changing spiritual sensibilities. The expansion of the Roman Empire also played a crucial role. As Rome asserted its dominance over the Greek world, the political landscape shifted dramatically. The independent Greek city-states, whose internal and external affairs often hinged on Delphic prophecies, lost much of their autonomy. Roman leaders, while often respecting Greek traditions, generally relied more on their own systems of augury, omens, and military strategy rather than regularly consulting a foreign oracle for every major decision. While some Roman emperors did visit Delphi and offer gifts, the oracle's direct political influence waned considerably under Roman rule. The very ambiguity of the prophecies, once a strength, may have also contributed to the decline. While it allowed the oracle to maintain its infallibility, it also frustrated those seeking clear, decisive answers in an increasingly complex world. As political stakes grew higher and conflicts became more intricate, leaders might have found the cryptic nature of the Pythia's utterances less practical or actionable compared to direct military intelligence or political negotiation. The demand for concrete guidance rather than riddles slowly grew. For you, the Pythia, the decline would mean more isolation. Perhaps fewer supplicants meant longer periods of silence, fewer calls to the Adyton, and thus, perhaps, fewer opportunities for the profound, disturbing trance. This might seem like a blessing at first, a reprieve from the physical and psychological toll, but it could also lead to a different kind of burden, the weight of dwindling purpose. The eerie silence where once the god's voice roared. The very air of the Adyton might feel less potent, the pneuma less eager to rise. The physical toll on the Pythias themselves might have also factored into the oracle's eventual silence. As mentioned before, serving for decades, enduring repeated exposure to the suspected gases and the physical strain of the trances, likely led to chronic health issues. Perhaps in later centuries, finding healthy young women willing and able to endure such a demanding and potentially life-shortening role became increasingly difficult. The pool of suitable candidates might have shrunk, making continuous service harder to maintain. It's a chilling thought that the very act of channeling divine power might have inadvertently contributed to the oracle's eventual demise by physically debilitating its human vessels. The final, definitive end of the Oracle of Delphi is often associated with the Roman Emperor Theodosius IV, who, in the late 4th century CE, issued decrees effectively outlawing pagan cults and practices across the Roman Empire in favor of Christianity. Temples were closed, rituals forbidden, and the ancient gods gradually fell silent. For Delphi, this was the official end. The sacred fire in the Adyton would have been extinguished. The tripod left cold and empty. The whispers of the pneuma finally hushed forever. Imagine that last day. The high priests, their faces etched with despair, performing final solemn rites. The temple complex, once bustling with pilgrims, now eerily quiet. The echoes of ancient hymns replaced by the chilling silence of abandonment. And you, the Pythia. Perhaps an elderly woman by then, witnessing the end of an era, the end of your sacred purpose. You would no longer be needed, no longer the vessel. Your life, once so profoundly defined by your connection to Apollo, would suddenly be adrift, stripped of its central meaning. The legacy of the Pythia, however, extends far beyond its eventual silence. Even after its demise, the Delphic oracle continued to captivate the imagination. Its prophecies were collected, studied, and debated by scholars for centuries. The influence it had on Greek history shaping wars, guiding colonization, influencing law left an indelible mark on Western civilization. The very concept of seeking divine guidance, of wrestling with cryptic prophecies, continued to resonate in literature, philosophy, and political thought. The mystery of the Pythia's trance also endures. Was it truly the breath of Apollo, geological gases, or a complex interplay of psychology, ritual, and belief? The tantalizing discovery of active fault lines beneath the temple in modern times has only deepened the intrigue. suggesting that perhaps the ancients were not entirely wrong in their understanding of the site's unique properties. This scientific exploration continues to this day, a testament to the enduring questions posed by this ancient phenomenon. You, the Pythia, a woman who surrendered her life to become a living bridge between worlds, left behind a legacy far greater than any individual could comprehend. Your silent, disturbing truth, the physical and psychological cost of your divine connection, shaped the ancient world in ways we are still trying to fully understand. The echoes of your voice, like however distorted by time and interpretation, still resonate from the ancient stones of Delphi, a powerful reminder of the human yearning for answers and the extraordinary, sometimes terrifying, lengths to which we will go to find them. The oracle may be silent, but its story, your story, continues to whisper through the ages. The silence that eventually fell over Delphi, after centuries of vibrant, echoing prophecies, was not just the quiet of a defunct temple. It was the profound stillness that followed the cessation of a living, breathing connection to the divine. For you, the Pythia, this eventual silence marked the end of a life defined by unparalleled intensity and profound personal sacrifice. The decline of the oracle was a slow, agonizing process, a gradual dimming of the spiritual beacon that had once guided the entire Greek world. The reasons for this ultimate quietude were multifaceted, a complex interplay of internal and external forces that conspired to draw the curtain on one of history's most fascinating institutions. As the oracle's influence waned, so too did the steady stream of pilgrims and the lavish offerings that had sustained the vast temple complex for centuries. The grandeur slowly faded, replaced by the quiet decay of neglect. One of the most significant external forces was the rise of the Roman Empire and the subsequent shift in geopolitical power. While the early Romans often respected and even consulted Delphi, their own systems of governance, military strategy, and religious practices gradually superseded the need for a foreign oracle. Roman emperors, though some might visit for curiosity or political legitimization, did not rely on the Pythia's pronouncements to the same degree as the independent Greek city-states had. The political autonomy of those Greek states, which had so eagerly sought divine guidance, was subsumed under Roman rule, diminishing the oracle's direct political relevance. Hand in hand with political shifts came religious transformation. The ancient Greek polytheistic pantheon, with Apollo at its heart, faced increasing competition from new burgeoning spiritual movements. The most dominant of these was the burgeoning faith of Christianity, which, with its monotheistic tenets and promise of personal salvation, presented a fundamentally different worldview. As Christianity gained widespread acceptance and eventually became the official religion of the Roman Empire, pagan cults, including the worship of Apollo at Delphi, faced increasing suppression. Imperial edicts, such as those issued by Emperor Theodosius III in the late 4th century CE, actively outlawed pagan practices, effectively sounding the death knell for ancient oracular sites like Delphi. Internally, the changing intellectual climate within the Greek world itself played a crucial role. The flourishing of philosophy, particularly the emphasis on human reason and logic by thinkers like Plato and Aristotle, encouraged people to seek answers through rational inquiry rather than through cryptic divine pronouncements. As critical thinking and empirical observation gained prominence, the ambiguity inherent in the Delphic prophecies, once a strength, became a source of frustration for those seeking clear, definitive answers in an increasingly complex world. Why rely on a riddle when human intellect could potentially uncover clearer truths? For you, the Pythia, this decline would have manifested as a profound shift in your daily reality. The sacred call to the autoton would become less frequent, the periods of profound trance spaced further apart. The vibrant energy of the sanctuary, once buzzing with supplicants and their anxious prayers would gradually give way to an eerie quiet. The once overwhelming sense of purpose might have been replaced by a subtle, unsettling emptiness, a growing feeling of being a sacred vessel no longer needed. The pneuma, perhaps, ceased to flow with its former intensity, or perhaps the belief in its efficacy waned, breaking the delicate spiritual connection. The physical toll that your role demanded might have also made it increasingly difficult to find women willing or able to serve. The constant exposure to the presumed gases, the immense physical strain of the trances, and the profound psychological burden of isolation and disassociation likely led to chronic health issues and shortened lifespans for many Pythias. As generations passed, it might have become harder to find suitable candidates, or perhaps the women themselves began to resist a destiny that promised reverence, but delivered only suffering and an early demise. The very act of channeling the divine, in its destructive purity, contributed to the oracle's eventual silence by consuming its human instruments. The final act of Delphi's closure would have been steeped in solemnity and despair. Imagine the last high priests, their faces etched with grief, performing final, poignant rituals. The sacred fire in the Adyton, which had burned for over a millennium, would have been extinguished, its smoke no longer rising to the heavens. The tripod, once the very seat of divine wisdom, would be left cold and empty, a silent relic of a bygone era. The once echoing chambers would now resonate only with the sounds of the wind whistling through empty halls, the whispers of history slowly fading into the quiet of abandonment. With the official closure, you, the last Pythia, if you were still alive, would have faced a profound existential shift. Your life, once entirely defined by your sacred duty to Apollo, would suddenly be adrift, stripped of its central meaning. The divine connection that had consumed your very being would now be severed, leaving behind a void. You would no longer be the vessel, no longer the voice of the god. It was a liberation, perhaps, but also a profound loss of purpose. Yet, even in its silence, the legacy of the Delphic oracle continued to resonate through the centuries. Its prophecies, though no longer uttered, were preserved in historical texts, studied by scholars, and debated by philosophers. The influence it had on Greek history, shaping wars, guiding colonization, influencing law, and fostering a sense of shared Hellenic identity, left an indelible mark on Western civilization. The very concept of seeking divine guidance, of wrestling with cryptic prophecies, continued to echo in literature, drama, and political thought, reminding future generations of the powerful human need for answers from the unknown. The mystery of the Pythias trance itself endures, captivating minds even today. Was it truly the breath of Apollo, geological gases, or a complex interplay of psychology, ritual, and deeply held belief? The tantalizing discovery of active fault lines beneath the temple in modern times has only deepened the intrigue, lending a surprising degree of credence to the ancient accounts. Geologists and archaeologists continue to explore this fascinating intersection of science and antiquity, trying to unravel the precise mechanisms behind the Pythia's profound states. This ongoing scientific exploration is a testament to the enduring questions posed by this ancient phenomenon, a testament to how history continues to whisper its secrets across time. You, the Pythia, an ordinary woman chosen for an extraordinary, disturbing role, left behind a legacy far greater than any individual could comprehend. Your silent, disturbing truth, the physical and psychological cost of your divine connection, shaped the ancient world in ways we are still trying to fully understand. The echoes of your voice, however distorted by time and interpretation, still resonate from the ancient stones of Delphi, a powerful reminder of the human yearning for answers and the extraordinary, sometimes terrifying, lengths to which we will go to find them. The oracle may be silent, its chamber empty, its priests long gone, but its story, your story, continues to whisper through the ages, a haunting, beautiful testament to the enduring power of myth, belief, and the human spirit. And so, the echoes of the Oracle of Delphi fade into the night, leaving behind ancient stones and whispering questions on the wind. Tonight, as you prepare to fall asleep. Remember the Pythia, the woman who dedicated her life to becoming a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. Her story, though haunting and full of sacrifice, is a powerful testament to the human quest for knowledge and meaning. Let these ancient mysteries gently guide you into a deep slumber,